Dan, you're not at all alarmed that the last administration ended with people storming the Capitol?
Kamala Harris, she doesn't instill in me a sense of being a natural commander-in-chief.
That feels like something that for you and your therapist, I think, Piers.
Would it not have been better for the Democrats when it was clear Biden couldn't continue and the knives came out for him? Would it not have been better for the Democrats to have had an internal battle to choose their nominee rather than just crown Kamala Harris and hope for the best?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, Piers. I was pushing for Joe Biden to get out of the race because of his age, not because of his policies long before that. And unfortunately, it came too late. And he ended up with, kind of at a moment where there really wasn't time to do that. And his vice president has stepped up. As you pointed out, his vice president, Kamala Harris, crushed Donald Trump in that debate, absolutely annihilated her. So if her policies and if her rhetoric is that weak and if she's low IQ, like Donald Trump said, it's unclear why he was unable to make a single coherent argument against her that was not word salad. And frankly, I also just disagree with the congressman when it comes to the policies. I mean, I think that the Biden administration has had some policies that are too liberal for me, but much of what they passed has been bipartisan, including the infrastructure bill, including the CHIPS Act. The economy is coming in for a soft landing. The American economy is the envy of the world. And I think Kamala Harris has put out a pretty detailed economic policy that's far superior to Donald Trump's. What Donald Trump has put forth for his economic policy is a 20% across the board tariff, which I know Dan Crenshaw cannot possibly support, and just a budget busting $5 trillion more added to our deficit. That's Donald Trump's policies. So I think when it comes to rhetoric, preparation, and policy, she's superior.
My issue with Kamala Harris is not that she's not intelligent. She obviously is. She's done extremely well with her life as a lawyer, senator, and so on. It's not that she, isn't personable. And it's not that I don't share her vision that we'd all love to feel more joyful. It's how are we going to get to this utopia? And she has single-handedly, throughout all of these exchanges, declined or doesn't know how we're going to get to utopia. Does that not concern you?
Yeah, no, because we're not getting to utopia. We need somebody to run and manage the government, okay, Piers? And so on this question of how she's going to pay for her plans, there isn't a good answer, so she didn't give one. I agree with that. I'm a fiscal conservative. I wish that they would be balancing the budget. But here's the thing. She's running against Donald Trump, whose answer to that question is even more incoherent. Despite Dan's attempt at a history lesson over there, what Donald Trump said was how he was going to pay for his plans was that he was going to tariff China, and we were going to use the tariff money as if it's like a government fee, like we're getting this fee, and that he's going to pay for free healthcare. He's going to pay for childcare. He's going to pay for everything with these magical tariffs. Like, he has no coherent answer on this. And here's the other thing: what is not good for the economy is instability. And Donald Trump is an absolute wreck of a human. We have no idea what he would do in a second term. When he left office, there was a mob of people storming the Capitol trying to attack Congressman Crenshaw. That's what was happening. They were waving his flag. They were storming the Capitol. They were trying to keep him in power. I'm sorry, just let me finish this. Let me finish this.
It's such a strange thing to say.
Let me finish this. No, I'm sorry. This is what happened at the end of his term. And even his own supporters were like, we are concerned that he can't stay in another 14 days. They talked about the 25th Amendment. Dan Crenshaw at the time said that he was on the side of the rioters, that the president was on the side of the rioters. That's what he said. And now, because of that, his own vice president, his own chief of staff, it's not me, it's not somebody that is obsessed with Trump, his own Department of Transportation, Secretary of Defense, all of these people can't support him again because they don't know what he's going to do, because he's so erratic, because he's of such low character. We can't put somebody like that in. That is dangerous for the country, for our democracy, but also for the economy.
But we have to go back to what you said. You have to go back to what you said about the economy and not knowing what he's going to do. That's nonsense.
You know exactly what he's going to do because he led
the country for 4 years.
You don't want to talk about it.
She can't even articulate what she's even talking about. And nobody knows what her economic policy is based on these answers. And in the end, it's what we actually want is what we got under Donald Trump. I mean, under Donald Trump, you actually had wage growth. And the lowest quintile of earners had 16% wage growth. Under Biden and Harris, 0%, because wage growth didn't outpace inflation. Inflation was created by too much government spending. Do not take my word for that. You can look at the Fed minutes and their assessment of it under a Biden administration, by the way. And what happened was when you add too much money into the economy, which is in the form of welfare or in the form of corporate cronyism under the IRA with hundreds of billions of dollars spent that's going to NGOs and nonprofits and venture capitalists that are then going to green renewable energy, what are you going to get? You're going to get massive inflation just like we got under Biden and Harris. That's what people are going to remember. And we can actually associate those outcomes with the policies that they implemented.
All right, Tim, surely, Tim, you must recoil a bit when you see the way she responds to those kind of questions. I mean, she literally says nothing. It's
I don't.
It's just blather.
I don't, because this is the thing. You guys don't want to show Donald Trump's answers because they're even more word salad. It's lies and it's conspiracies and it's dangerous. And like, that's why we're not showing his interviews where he's lying about what's happening with Hurricane Helene right now, or the debate where Kamala mopped the floor with him. Here's the thing. Congressman Crenshaw wants your audience to think that the Republican Party right now is the same as it was in 2017, and that the Donald Trump administration will be the same as it was when he brought in a bunch of traditional Republicans to be around him in his cabinet and to work in his staff. And I'm sorry, that's just an imaginary world that the congressman wants to live in to feel comfortable. Because what the world we live in now is all of those people. No, I'm sorry, Piers, let me finish. All of those people are gone now. And at the RNC at the box, the people around Trump are Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson. Tucker had a prominent spot to speak at the convention. Congressman Crenshaw did not. This new party is a nativist party that's going to be about mass deportations and tariffs and revenge on Donald Trump's enemies. If you don't believe me, listen to what Donald Trump says. And I just want to know why Congressman Crenshaw thinks that he understands where the party is better than Trump's own vice president, Mike Pence, who assesses this and says, no, this is not someone we can trust. Why does Congressman Crenshaw think that he knows better than Mike Pence about Donald Trump's character and what kind of policies he would put in place?
Dan, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I'll just remind everybody that we're about to vote in November. And on your ballot, it doesn't ask you the question of whether Donald Trump is the same as Jesus Christ. That's not what the question is. The question is, do you prefer Donald Trump or do you prefer Kamala Harris? And so any reasonable and objective person is going to look at that question and they're going to say, well, okay, well, what things matter to me? Do I want better immigration policy? Do I want my border to actually have law and order around it? Do I want my cities to be safe? Do I want a peace through strength type of foreign policy? Do I want Abraham Accords or do I want October 7th?
These guys can't answer this.
Do I want a better economy with less regulations? Do I want my oil and gas industry to be pummeled by regulation after regulation? Or do I want my electricity prices to go back down? That's the question. And that's the question that people are going to be answering.
That's a damning non-answer, to borrow a phrase.
Mass deportations, a vast majority. That's not a non-answer. I'm the only one actually giving facts.
It is a non-answer. Why do you know better than Mike Pence?
Is broadly supported by the American people, including Hispanics.
Why shouldn't we listen to Donald Trump's vice president and his chief of staff?
So ask the question a different way, then, Tim.
Why shouldn't we listen to Mike?
Them. I'm not here to answer for them. I'm here to answer for me.
Doesn't it alarm you?
I'm here to lay this out very simply.
You don't feel at all
for the American
alarmed
people and what the choices are.
Dan, you're not at all alarmed that the last administration ended with people storming the Capitol.
Let me.
Yeah, you know what happened. You know what happened after that? Because I was there. You know what happened after that? A few hours later. We did our jobs and we got back to business. You know what happened a few weeks later? Donald Trump moved out of the White House without a word. He didn't move out of the White House?
Well, no. It's not true because for starters, you didn't go back.
Am I confused or are you confused?
Who's shrieking now? For starters, you didn't go back to business. There were votes to overturn the election. And as you said, your colleague, Ted Cruz of Texas, voted on the side of the rioters. And then Donald Trump didn't go to the inauguration for the first time in history. He went home like a petulant child. I want to read something that Dan Crenshaw wrote. Here's Dan.
Okay, so you're mad that he didn't go to the inauguration. That's what it is?
He didn't. We didn't have a peaceful transfer of power. He didn't. In every other transition before this, the outgoing president, their team invites the incoming team in.
Okay, so
this is what we do in a normal democracy.
So let me just get this straight. Because he didn't sit there in January and watch President Biden get inaugurated.
No, Dan. Because
that's not a peaceful transition of power. That is such an absurd statement to make. But go ahead.
Okay, Dan.
I'm glad you're reading quotes from my book. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Dan, fine. Then that's not the sitting there that I care about. How about when he sat there off the Oval Office for hours watching TV while a mob of people carrying his flag attacked police officers and stormed the Capitol. The President of the United States was not on the side of the Capitol Police. He sat there and watched his DVR, and he ate his well-done hamburgers and did nothing. He did nothing for the Capitol Police that stood there because he was rooting for them to lose. That is not a peaceful transfer of power. That is Donald Trump's behavior that is unacceptable. And honestly, if anybody else in American public life was running against him, I would be for them, including you, including Nikki Haley, who I voted for, including almost all of the elected Democrats.
All right, listen.
That was unacceptable behavior, Dan. That was unacceptable behavior. Do you think
many people would agree with? I thought that was unacceptable behavior, but let's move forward to
Congressman.
Congressman,
was it unacceptable behavior for you?
I don't need to answer these questions again. I did an entire podcast calling it what it was. I did.
Yeah.
At the moment, I was calling it what it was.
I want to move anyway, Tim. I want to move to where we are.
Talk to somebody else if you want to get
Let's move to where we are.
I do not trust the Donald Trump administration that did child separations, that is going to have Stephen Miller in charge of the immigration
Obama
regime.
separated people, kids and families.
Could I please? To do a mass deportation. And another good reason not to trust them is you're doing this performative thing where I'm a little bit upset about how Kamala's exaggerating on this or that. But like Donald Trump is making up just flat out lies, inhuman lies about people that are in this country illegally and planning to deport them, saying he will deport like the Haitian migrants who have legal status here in this country. He went on a national TV stage and said that they were stealing pets from their neighbors and eating them. Like, this is so mean and so inhumane. Think about
for the record, I thought that was completely wrong, and I think it backfired. It backfired hideously for him. Yeah, but the bigger picture. Let me come to Dan.
How can you trust a person? Can I just say one last thing?
Yeah.
I just don't. How can you trust a person like this? How can you trust a person whose character is like this, who will lie, who will tell you that he won when he lost, who will tell you that people here legally are eating pet animals and stealing them, who will tell you that we're not helping people who are suffering from Hurricane Helene? Like, he is a bad person that lies and tells cruel and inhumane lies.
Let me go to Dan.
All the time. How do you defend that type of
orange man argument?
Dan, your response.
The bad orange man.
Yeah, Dan, he's bad. You know who said he was bad? You said that he was an insane idiot.
Let Dan answer.
In like literally 2015. So, and he might have gotten the cats and dogs wrong, but you know what's not wrong? Lake and Riley. That's not a fake story. Okay, here in Houston, Jocelyn Nungri. That's not a fake story. These are people who shouldn't have gotten into the country in the first place and then committed horrible rapes and murders. There are tens of thousands of more crimes that have been committed. And people are understandably upset about those crimes. Why? Because you've already committed a crime before you committed that crime. You came in illegally, and you came in illegally because this administration undid every executive order that Trump had in place to try and fix the problem, and they created a massive, massive new problem. And you say we can't trust Trump? Like, well, again, that's an emotional argument, because all we have to do is look at the history of his policies, his executive orders. No, stop interrupting me. It is an emotional argument, because an objective argument would be, okay, what is somebody going to do? Well, they already had the job once. So I have a feeling that they're probably going to do the same policies that got the border under control the first time. And they're going to immediately re-implement those policies that got the border under control. How is that an emotional argument?
You're making an emotional argument.
That's an objective argument based on history. That's based on history.
You're saying I have a feeling. This is like saying, all right, man, I got hammered at the bar, and I drove 90 miles an hour down the highway, and I spun out, and we circled around, and I landed straight. And that means I should just get hammered and drive again, because last time we barely survived with only a little insurrection. We had a mild insurrection. Look, Dan,
listen,
character matters. You know that.
I'll help you out.
Dan, you wrote a whole book about this.
Okay?
Character matters. It does. In a leader, character matters. You
here.
cannot lie about people. You cannot advance racist lies. And you cannot tell people that our elections are fraudulent when they're real. You cannot tell people that they're eating pets, that the government doesn't care about you, that the country's going to end. All of these lies that he tells, that affects the country, man.
Okay, so your argument is that you do not like his character. You've made that very clear. But again,
it's objective
the
point
choice
about
on
his
the
character, about
ballot
these lies. It's not about me.
That's fine, but then another objective point would be what our choice is in this election. And the choice is not a question, a yes or no question on whether you think Trump has a perfect character. That's not the question on the ballot. The question on the ballot is about who will do a better job running the country for the next 4 years. And this is a really interesting case where we actually have 4 years from each candidate where we know exactly what their policies are going to be and what their outcomes are going to be. And on every metric, Trump wins on those metrics. You may still not like his character, and I'm not going to try and convince you to. But on the metrics, he wins on every single one.
That's not right, though.
Name one where he doesn't. Right.
The metrics only count for him if you stop the metrics before COVID happens, because COVID wasn't his fault. I actually agree with this. I don't blame Trump for COVID, but you can't say that all of the job loss that happened, the huge spike in crime that happened in 2020 while Trump was president, you cannot say that that was not his fault because of COVID. But then everything that happened in 2021 on everything, the COVID had nothing to do with any of that. That's all Biden's policies. Look, we had this huge disruption that happened under Trump. And if you actually just look at the metrics,
of course I can.
You want to say metrics. If you look at just the metrics of crime and jobs, it's better under Biden. Sorry, that's just facts. Those are metrics.
That was debunked in the last debate that they had on this.
Let me switch
on the crime issue. And look, and you know this very well. Like, you know that across the country, crime is spiking because left-wing district attorneys and left-wing judges are letting criminals out on $1 bonds, and they go out and murder. Okay, what do you mean crime is going down? That was debunked. That was a claim that was made by CBS during the election. And yeah, let's talk about 2020. Was that a bunch of Republicans out there causing $2 billion in damage? Was that a bunch of Republican rioters?
No, but it wasn't a bunch of Biden supporters.
No, of course not. Was Trump asking governors to put the National Guard in to stop it? Yes, of course he was. All right. Was governors like Tim Walz preventing that from happening and allowing Minneapolis to be burned down? Of course he was.
Why didn't he do that in D.C.? Look, again, I agree. The rioting was bad during 2020. The people that were rioting weren't waving Kamala Harris flags. Okay, they were Antifa. They were saying they were the same people that say Genocide Joe. This is not the Democratic establishment. There were Trump flags over the Capitol as cops were getting attacked. Trump flags over the Capitol as cops were getting attacked. That was Donald Trump's fault.
Okay.
He said there. He didn't send there. You refused to talk.
Hang on. We've already done January the 6th. Kamala Harris, she doesn't instill in me, and I'm sure she wouldn't in you, a sense of being a natural commander-in-chief, does she?
It feels like something that for you and your therapist, I think, Piers, because she does seem like that to me. I mean, she was in full command again in a debate with Donald Trump. He had plenty of opportunities to demonstrate why she would not be strong on the national stage on national security, and he didn't do it. And if you just listen to our allies, many of them, certainly in private conversations, would feel much more comfortable with Kamala Harris and her experience going to the Munich Security Conference and elsewhere. So look, again, Tucker Carlson, who this is a person that me and Dan agree on, does not have smart foreign policy. He was influential in picking Trump's VP. He's going to be influential in who is around Trump. Trump's national security team from the first term that Dan keeps praising don't support him. His Secretary of Defense, his national security advisor, his former general chief of staff, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, none of them support him. So I think it could be a very different second term when it comes to Donald Trump. And then you just look at his behavior when he's been on his own. We have the Woodward book where we've learned this week that he's had maybe up to 7 private one-on-one conversations with Putin during this period where Putin invaded a Democratic ally. That is deeply alarming. He was sending Putin back-channel COVID tests, apparently. I think that the risk here is very high. I kind of agree with Dan that I thought his foreign policy was pretty good the first couple of years, but the people that were executing that plan are not coming back. There's going to be a new group of more nationalist, more isolationist people and Trump says this himself. He says, I know who the MAGA people are now. So I would be deeply alarmed about a second term, and I'm deeply alarmed about his relationship with Putin that has been reported between 2021 and 2024. I mean, all I would say about his relationship. And I was deeply alarmed. Finally, speaking just on a public thing, even if you don't buy the Woodward, he stood next to Zelensky and talked about how great his relationship with Putin was. I just think across the board,
it should be noted, though, Tim, that Putin didn't pull any stunts under Trump. He only pulled them when Trump was out of office. And I do think there's something about Trump's way with dealing with these leaders of Russia and China and North Korea, which is oddly quite effective. I do.
I think that's
none of them pulled any stunts on his watch. I mean, it may be coincidence, but they didn't.
Yeah,
it's
the
kind of a
reality
child's
is
way to
the
look at the world.
outcomes
It's
are
kind
the
of like
outcomes.
it's kind of like saying that
under
9/11
Trump, we didn't lose
happened because
Afghanistan.
Sorry, Dan.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is again. We're just engaging in guesswork here when all we have to do is look at 4 years of history, and you see all these people are gone, but they're not gone. Mike Pompeo is not gone.
they're not supporting him.
Again, Robert O'Brien is not gone. Yes, they are. Did you hear
Not
the
as
names I
cabinet,
just said?
not
They
as
absolutely
Secretary of
are. And
Defense.
there's a high likelihood they'll be in
Neither
the
of his national
administration.
security
Chad, well, these
advisors are
people-
supporting him, Dan. Dan, neither of his
Yeah,
national
look,
security
you can have a
advisors,
long list
neither
of
John
people.
Bolton
You can
nor
have
H.R. McMaster are
Robert
supporting him. That's just a
O'Brien.
fact.
Robert O'Brien is definitely supporting Trump. I think you're confused on that.
Okay,
third
let's
in
move.
any
Okay,
case,
let's move on.
And Robert O'Brien sees.
Let me
things
move
the way
on.
we
I want to
see
move
it.
on. I want to move on to
Right,
someone
again,
who.
you're engaging in total guesswork. You're
Let's
engaging
move-
in total guesswork, and all I have to do is compare 4 years to 4 years and show people what that looks like.
Let me move on to
Whose
Elon.
argument's stronger?
I want to move on to.
I do just because Congressman has kept coming back to this. If you don't mind, I'd just like to say very briefly that he ended the last answer by saying that his argument is stronger because if you just look at the 4 years. And again, I do just need to remind us that kind of just acts as if 2020 didn't happen because Donald Trump left the White House in 2020 with record unemployment, with crime skyrocketing, and with blood of police officers on our Capitol. That's how he left and went back to Mar-a-Lago. That's how he left. So I think if you just objectively look at those 4 years, I think you can see why his character flaws and his policy failures, really, but mostly why his character flaws led to bad outcomes. And I got cut off earlier, but Dan wrote this in his book. He wrote that a culture characterized by self-pity, indulgence, outrage, and resentment is a culture that falls apart. And I think that's true about a country and a party, that if you're led by someone that is full of self-pity, indulgence, outrage, and resentment, that describes Donald Trump better than anything I've ever heard, actually. I think that is going to lead to a country that falls apart. I think we saw that with the chaos surrounding the election and COVID as Trump left office. And I think that we would see a similar chaos again if we put him back in.
And you mentioned my book. Look, that thing that I'm worried about, the pity and then the self-indulgence and the sense of resentment, yeah, that's true across all populist movements. The left is the definition of a populist movement. Because what do I mean by that? Telling people what they want to hear instead of the truth. And that's the Democrat way. Hey, something else is your fault. Somebody else is at fault. Maybe it's because they're a different gender or a different skin color, but they're at fault for your problems. You're not at fault for your problems. So here's a free check. Just vote for me. That's populism. And it's bad. It doesn't matter who's doing it. It's bad. And we should, as Americans, understand that and not fall for it. Not fall for this idea that we should burn it all down and destroy everything because the other side is so evil.
Okay, well, you know what? We've reached the point.
Again,
I think we've reached the point,
I have
gentlemen.
4 years to look at how we governed, and I'm comfortable with
We
it.
have a point where Tim
Don't fall
nods
for
and
it,
says,
Dan. Do the right thing.
Where Tim nods and says, I agree. It feels like a good moment to end this actually rather civilized debate, and I appreciate the respectful way you've gone about it. Thank you both very much indeed.